Welcome in today. We're going to be talking about John Brown's raid on his Harper's Ferry in a historical context. We're your hosts. I'm Chase.
I'm Max.
I'm Gus.
So John Brown was born in 1800 to a pioneer family and was named after his grandfather, who died fighting in the Revolutionary War. He spent his youth in the Ohio frontier country, and Brown's father thought that it was his Christian duty to free enslaved men. He took his father's morals to heart, and during the War of 1812, he actually befriended a black boy who was being cruelly beaten. And Brown was a father of 20 children with numerous failed business ventures, but his abolitionist views never failed. His response he was responsible for killing around a half dozen slave owners in Kansas and Missouri, and also helped free 12 slaves by transporting them to Missouri and Canada. And after that, he wrote a provisionary constitution for the state of Virginia after he completed his plan for overthrowing the state with an ex-slave militia army, which he actually wrote in the attic of Frederick Douglass's house. He also befriended Frederick Douglass and asked him and Harriet Tubman to join his militia, and he conducted his raid on Harper's Ferry in West Virginia to help free enslaved people and overthrow their governing ways. So in the raid, luckily, John Brown's Republican views towards abolishing slavery weren't blamed on the Republican Party, but on the Northern Yankees instead. And he never associated himself with the political party, which kind of saved the Republican Party from a lot of backlash. And in William Freeling's book, The Road to Disunion, Volume 2, he talks about the attack on Harper's Ferry, but also how horrible Mr. Brown's execution was. And so the raid took place on October 16th, 1859, and it lasted 2 days. It was incredibly strategized and planned, but the execution failed miserably. And Freeling even said in his book, no other first strike has been better planned out or carried out, which is only to say John Brown here perfected his lifelong specialty. No other following tactics have ever been botched so badly, which is only to say that John Brown here succumbed to his lifelong flaw on page 212. And in the process of his attack, the first shot taken was actually against a black man, leaving him injured. And he also happened to lose two of his sons. When one of his sons was fatally injured, he asked him to put him out of his misery. And Freeling quoted Mr. Brown periodically in his book, saying, when his son Oliver lay dying at Harper's Ferry, horribly suffering and begging his father to kill him with a merciful bullet, John Brown refused to pull the trigger. If you must die, proclaimed God's terrorist, die like a man, on page 207. And Brown was a man of God, and he believed that it was his purpose to carry out this attack. And Freeling also says that Brown heard God's call for the Harper's Ferry strike on page 208. So when the South expanded slavery to Texas, claiming that it would not spread past slave states, he had more hate for the Confederacy, and he grew up with the ideology thinking slavery was bad, and all the events that took place up to his attack just fueled his motive to go through with it even more.
The aftermath of John Brown's capture has gone down in American history as an almost mythic-like tale of a controversial character's attempt to change his nation's story. In many ways, John Brown did this, and his character story was portrayed across the country as both a martyr and a terrorist. The story of John Brown is important for understanding the reason why both political sides of the nation carried out such violent acts, like bleeding Kansas, leading up to the most violent time in American history, the Civil War. The trial period was the most important part of this story. Brown knew that he was destined for martyrdom and seemed to live those days in a state of euphoria, knowing that he was becoming a symbol of the abolitionist movement. He wrote many letters to his wife and others with pride in what he had done. One of his most famous is this short quote: "I have been whipped, but can recover from the lost capital only by hanging a few moments by the neck." These quotes from John Brown were ample because of the months he spent in jail before hanging, where almost anyone was allowed to visit him. During these visits, he was incredibly confident and charismatic, even winning over his jailer, who was quoted as saying, "He converses freely, fluently, and cheerfully without the slightest manifestation of fear." During his time when he wrote over 100 letters to newspapers, editors, and magazines across the country, in all of these writings, his character was so provocative that his martyrdom outgrew his actions, but now with his words and his beliefs it carried. Brown got to convey his message to a whole nation, a message that many abolitionists felt they could relate to, and others were moved by his words. While in the South, he was portrayed as an extremist Satanist reborn, and was not only guilty of spreading violence, but also attesting God by being a false prophet.
How did John Brown's act affect the nation going forward? The raid at Harper's Ferry left its mark in history, helping change the country significantly. The raid impacted politics, separating Republicans and Democrats even farther apart in beliefs on anti-slaveryism. A growing nation separated by new land and slavery impacted a new generation of women. They were now pushing for more rights and full citizenship. This was a first. At a time where women were shunned for taking part in politics, they saw the anti-slavery movement as a way out. This was a new generation of women. But the Democrats still tried to push and tie all Republicans to John Brown, calling them cowards and violent. As Hosmer says, Democrats allege that John Brown's raid was the natural result of the Republican anti-slaveryism, page 75. This is how the Democrats plan to take out the Republicans, by persuading the people that the Republicans are all just like John Brown. Not only was this a problem, but the Democrats also claimed that any woman who supported John Brown was opinionated and manly. This sparked a new light in some women's minds. More and more women started taking part in politics and showing their own voice. It was the start of a feminist movement. A new wave of women was coming through. With such an uprising of abolitionists, the question remained whether the new Western states would be slave-holding states. The Democrats pushed for slavery, saying that if slavery is abolished, there will be violence and backlash among the community, while the Republicans believed it would open up more opportunities for the wealthy white farmer. New property to farm and produce crops was brought up to persuade Southerners. With both sides torn by slavery and freedom of slaves, the raid at Harper's Ferry pushed both sides further apart in beliefs. Through violence and a new generation of women pushing for more rights and power, the nation was split between North and South. Gender and race, both playing key roles in the solution, caused controversy and political parties. In the end, the way to an answer was battled out on the homeland of the United States. The raid at Harper's Ferry by John Brown proved to help shape a new nation in a time of conflict. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you guys again.